Do you love Sudha Murthy? I bet half of you just said no for the joke. It'll be a joke if you said you don't like Sudha Murthy. Have you read Sudha Murthy? Maybe, maybe not. But if you have, you can't say you didn't enjoy it. I'm somewhat of a Sudha Murthy enjoyer myself. So today we're going over another book by Sudha Murthy, which is not this one. Yeah, that one. Wise and Otherwise by Sudha Murthy. Yes, today we're going over Wise and Otherwise, A Salute to Life by Sudha Murthy. Not edited, this time it's actually written by Sudha Murthy, a reference to the last video. If I had to introduce this book, I would introduce it like this. Understanding human nature is one of the toughest jobs on the planet. What you think might be right, might be wrong from a deeper perspective. What you think might be wrong, might be right from a different perspective. You don't know how the world thinks. You don't know how people think. Everything can be different from a different perspective. That's just the interesting things about humans. But hearing and learning about such different instances and experiences helps us refine and improve our thought process. And just for that particular reason, this book has been written. It's a compilation of real life stories from Sudha Murthy's experiences and her life of traveling across India. Mind you, I've told that she also does a lot of social work, she helps out a lot of people, and I've made an entire video on her life. It is pretty recent, it's not outdated. I'll leave a link in the description down below and you can go and check it out. So from that video and many other sources, we know that she does a lot of social work, and that leads to her traveling across the country. And she notes down those experiences, jots them down, and brings them into books like this. It unravels human nature. This book basically breaks down human nature, shows what is good, what is bad, and what is weird, what is funny, everything about humans. There's a story of a son leaving his father in an old age home, a story of a cancer patient dying but still returning the money for her treatment, and so many more that move you, that inspire you, that motivate you, and even some that disgust you. Wise and Otherwise has had 2 published editions over the ages. I think the first one was published in 2002. It had only 50 stories, and the reprinted version in 2006 had 51 stories. This one particularly, which I have, has 51 stories and it has 220 pages. So I have the 2006 version, and if you're going to buy it, I would recommend you buy the latest version, which has the 51st story. It's not a big deal, but one story might just make a difference in your life. Like 3000 Stitches and all of her other books, she focuses on ordinary people. You can talk about so many other fantasy novels, but she talks about ordinary people, and the best thing about her stories is that they are actually real. At least, like I said in the last video, I hope they are real. They're all so interesting, so fun to read, so informative, and they give you that insight to humans which we require. Now on to my favorite stories from the book. I do this in all my Sudha Murthy videos just so that you get a gist of the stories and how they go, what's the plot, how long they are, and I get to tell some of my favorite stories. Matter of fact, we can play a game. If you've read this book or any other Sudha Murthy book, just point out your favorite stories, your favorite chapters, your favorite books, whatever, in the comments down. I'll make sure to notice that. The first one is A Lesson in Life from a Beggar. Now in this one, Sudha Murthy has a friend who's Meena. Meena is extremely pessimistic. Now we all have that person in our lives, let's be honest. We all have that one friend who always sees the worst in everyone, always sees the most horrible things, and always predicts the worst outcome. That might not necessarily be a bad thing, but sometimes people take it to the extreme. Like in this story, Meena is something described as a chronic pessimist. She tends to see the worst in absolutely everything. Like if you say someone's son got the first position in the school, she'll immediately find a way to belittle that and say, well, he is a teacher's child, so he gets bias and he gets favoritism. So there are people like that. So Meena is one such person, and no one really liked her. Sudha Murthy felt really depressed when talking to her, and she had absolutely no friends who actually liked her attitude. So Meena moves away from town. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Meena moves away from town, and when we're talking about such a person who no one likes, everyone just forgets about them. Again, that's a stupid insight to human nature, that we forget about people we don't like. Now we fast forward to a few more years or months, and Sudha Murthy meets Meena in the pouring rain outside. She sees her and she tries to avoid her because she knows what Meena is like. But Meena is all cheerful and happy, and Sudha Murthy says, wait, it's raining, we can't hang out. She says, don't worry, we'll go there. and she's ready to make so many compromises. And Sudha Murthy is like, she is not the same Meena, what changed? So she goes inside and she asks Meena, what changed? Why are you so different, if you don't mind me asking? So Meena says, when I went over to the other place and I used to give my food to this beggar and his granddaughter every single day, my leftover food. One day it was a strong downpour, it was heavily raining, and I couldn't give that family the food. So they had to leave their food that day. So I was feeling bad until I looked outside and saw the beggar and his granddaughter dancing in the rain without a care in the world, just having fun, full of life, full of zest. And that gave Meena an outlook to life. If a beggar who has absolutely nothing to live for, nothing to do, nothing to gain, nothing to work for, nothing to look forward to, can enjoy life that much, so a person who's living inside a house and living a rather well-to-do lifestyle should not complain about every single thing, should not have that pessimistic view. A beggar has a positive outlook of life, and Meena decided that she was going to change her pessimistic outlook. The second one is when the mop count did not tally. So for those of you wondering what mop means in the situation, mop is a sterilized cotton, a piece of sterilized cotton which is used during operations and surgeries, and they're usually put inside the patient's body. So the thing about mops is, what the doctors have to do is take the mops, you have them, you collect them, and then you count them before the surgery or operation starts. And afterwards, once you've put the mops inside the patient's body, at the end of the surgery, when you're like sewing it up or whatever, you need to count those mops, and the count at the end of the surgery should tally with the count at the start of the surgery, so that you know that not a single mop has been accidentally left over in the patient's body. This story talks about a nurse and a doctor who are operating on a patient. So the doctor says, give me the device for sewing, I'm going to sew the wound shut, I'm done with the operation. But the nurse says the mop count didn't tally. So the surgeon keeps raising his temper, he keeps getting madder and madder, and he keeps telling her to hand over the device, and she keeps refusing, saying that there is still a mop inside the patient's body. At one point the surgeon just gets frustrated and said there's nothing in there. But then he checks one last time, he's been checking again and again, but he checks one last time and there is a mop inside the patient's body. Before he could complete his sentence of asking for the tool, it was in his hands and he had started sewing the patient's wound close. At the end he apologized to the nurse and said, why, when I was raising my temper, when I was getting frustrated, why didn't you just give in? She says, I was just doing what I've been taught. The mop count at the start is supposed to tally with the mop count at the end. It's a simple rule, anyone can understand it. I was just following this simple rule. The third story is in India, the worst of both worlds. Now this was a unique story. A young man, carries an old man into Sudha Murthy's office and says that I found him sitting on the road and he doesn't have a place to stay. So Sudha Murthy, being helpful, offers the old man a place in the old age home. Then she moves on with her life. She keeps regularly sending money to that old age home and she keeps inquiring about the man from time to time. So one day the old age home called Sudha Murthy and said that the man is about to die. He's not feeling well and they don't know whether he'll make it or not. So before he dies, Sudha Murthy asks him if there's anyone he wants to call, if there's anyone he wants to meet. So he gives Sudha Murthy a phone number. She writes it down and she calls that number. She tells the person to come visit him as the old man is dying. And the person who comes is the same young man who left him in Sudha Murthy's office that day. On inquiring further, Sudha Murthy comes to know that that young man was actually the old man's son. And now that the old man is dying, he's just come to collect the old man's money. But the best part was the old man, even after being, it's a little harsh word, but betrayed by his son, is ready to give the money to his son and is ready to call his son, talk to his son. So Sudha Murthy gives the son a piece of her mind and says, whenever someone else in the future will come to help for a genuine problem, will come to help in our office, people like you will stay in my memory. People like you will haunt my memory, and because of people like you, I'll be suspicious of anyone who walks through those doors. Have some shame. The young man hung his head in shame and walked away. So I know that this is a common occurrence and it's a rather horrible thing. I don't understand why one would do this. It just doesn't make any sense. Your parents raised you since you were small, took care of you against so many odds. You don't get to just leave them. That's not a thing that happens. And the fourth and final story is a man too clever by half. It's not too big. A person walks into Sudha Murthy's office, and Sudha Murthy usually dresses in plain and simple clothes. So the man did not recognize her and thought that she was some random secretary. So he starts offering to sell his books over there. And she's fine with it up until he starts saying things like this. He says that I am Sudha Murthy's very good friend. Everything she's learned is from me. I was the one who introduced her to her husband. So she couldn't take it anymore. She told him to his face and said that I am Sudha Murthy. You're lying. I've never seen you before in my life. I don't know your aunt. I don't know your mother. I don't know any of the people you said. You came here trying to sell books. I might have bought them. But after what you've done today, you can clear out of here. Again, some people just make me think, what is wrong with you? How is that a thing that you do? You walk up, you don't think about anything, and you start bragging about the owner of the company being your best friend. It's not something you do. It's not something you expect to work. How? In one part of reading this book, I did at one point disagree with Sudha Murthy. One of her friends and someone she knew came up to her and asked her, do you have a ghostwriter? And she says, no. I can write my stories on my own. I do not need a ghostwriter. And the friend says, many people do it, so I thought I'll ask you. So Sudha Murthy goes on to write 2 paragraphs saying that there are many people like that person who asked her this. There are many people who like to see the worst in life. There are many people who like to come up with the worst conclusions. There are many people who like to see foul play in everything. I slightly disagree with that because there are so many people who are affected by so many things which we cannot judge. For all you know, that person has had something happen to them which makes them suspicious of people. For all you know, she's seen someone using a ghostwriter and now she's suspicious of all writers. We tend to not trust each other. That's fine, but there's always a reason behind it. Otherwise, I personally would call anyone who trusts everyone very, very gullible. You don't survive in today's world by trusting everybody. You need to have a cautious outlook. On that note, thank you so much for watching this video. And I am gonna see you guys next time. Goodbye. Later. I just realized how similar these 2 books look and why I was so confused. Half of the time I was holding this up and I was thinking, what's going wrong? This is not the book I was going to talk about. This is the book I'm supposed to talk about. It's a mistake that someone can make. The third story is in India, the best of... The third story is in India, the best of... What am I saying? The third story is in India, the worst of 2 worlds.